like a radio receiver. Right now in the air, there are all kinds of different radio signals, but it's up to you to determine what radio signal you tune into. And if you're going to tune into this radio signal that has a lot of like crappy jobs you don't care about and things like that, you're going to get a lot more of that through the radio speakers. But if you're tuning into a different channel that has like a lot more of the things that you do want to listen to, you're going to get a lot more interesting things coming your way.
Hey hatchlings, welcome to the Motion Hatch podcast. I'm your host, Hayley Akins. Hey, welcome to episode 44 of the Motion Hatch podcast. This is a podcast where we discuss the business side of motion design and animation. I cannot believe we are almost at episode 50. I think it's just incredible, really. I'm so thankful to be here and still making podcasts, and I thank you all for listening. On this week's podcast, we had Sander van Dijk. Now, he is an incredible motion designer. Many of you will already know him. He has done courses for School of Motion. He's also done his own freelance course, which we mentioned in the podcast. And we talked a lot about freelancing, a lot about getting direct clients. We also discussed mindset and about working for good and doing projects that you care about and taking time for yourself as well and for personal projects. So you know that I'm really passionate about those things, and this was a great episode. So let's get into it. Hey, Sander, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So obviously a lot of motion designers probably already know who you are, especially since you've brought out the Advanced Motion Methods course for School of Motion. But I was just wondering if you can tell us something about yourself that people might not know.
I think people have been familiar with my work for quite some time. And like the Advanced Motion Methods course actually came to be because people were actually asking me and they wanted to learn from me. So I've actually, when I was able to make time available for it, I went ahead and created both the Advanced Motion Methods course and also the freelance guide that I created. Something that people might not know, maybe like I'm really into architecture and carpentry. Like I used to do that before jumping into motion design at a very young age. So I really like to work with my hands and build things. And I still kind of crave a lot of that while I'm spending so much time behind a computer these days. So it's something that kind of keeps coming back to me. Another thing that I find fascinating is just kind of the workflow and the mindset of carpentry and architecture that I think translates a lot into the work that I do. And I also love studying like geometry and things like that to better understand like structure of how nature is put together and then how I can use that in my work. So I study a lot of like very old architecture, buildings, like Egyptian art, stuff like that have all very interesting like proportions and ratios and things like that in it that I find fascinating.
That's cool. Do you think that helps having a lot of outside influences to put into your work?
Yes, I think it does, because a lot of people always ask you like, well, where do you get inspiration from, right? When I find like looking at other people's work or just constantly looking on Vimeo what's new, that inspires you in some kind of way. That's obviously helpful. It's good to know like what other people are doing, but I think like it's very beneficial and helpful to have some kind of other interest that you can have that gives you inspiration on how to approach specific things in your own work. I'm really about opening up like to other bubbles, if you will, to learn more about those bubbles and like see how some of those techniques might apply to my work,
Yeah, I think that's quite smart, because then otherwise everyone's work looks the same because they're just being inspired by other people's work on Vimeo and Instagram and stuff. And I think it's good to kind of, look into other areas of art and things like that to help inspire us.
Right. Yeah. If everyone was just looking at each other's work all the time, then everything would look the same. Right. So it's nice to have like, and this is so cool too, because everyone, like my interests are in carpentry and architecture. Someone else's interest might be in music from the 80s or whatever. So you get a whole different kind of vibe in the animation compared to what I create.
I noticed that you're really involved with the motion design community because you're doing plugins, and then you also have your courses, the freelance one and the School of Motion one, which obviously we'll link them all in the show notes. And then also co-producing Blend. It's so much. It's like, do you think that being part of the community is important for all of motion designers to get into?
It's challenging for me to say what's important for you, but for me, I always have this mentality and question in mind, like, how can I add value to the community and add value to other people? And since a lot of the other people that I know are in the motion design community, I naturally kind of gravitate towards that. But also it's the same for the clients that I work with and some of the people I help with my skills. So and as a result of that question, I happen to build tools. I co-founded Blend, starting to share my knowledge now with these courses that I'm bringing out. And yeah, just doing meaningful work that is meaningful to me. The very first tool that I did was Ouroboros. That was just a thing that I created on a project that we're working on for Google at Buck. And I just thought that this was such a cool little rig that I built with expressions. Other people might benefit from that. And that's where I put it up online for free. Well, it was name your own price, so people could just fill in the price that they wanted to pay. And it got downloaded so much, and people were actually giving money to that I was actually able to, take that money and invest it back into creating more plugins. And so that kind of got that ball rolling. But I'd also say that if you want to learn as an artist and you want to become better, it's very helpful to be part of the community. I'm not here to tell you that you should or that it should be important to you, but it's got a lot of benefits to be part of it.
Yeah, I just think you can tell when some people in the industry are kind of going out there and they're on social media and they're doing different things outside of their freelance work and to help other people in the community. And like you say, you built a tool because you found it helpful and you were like, oh, some other people can benefit from this. And it seems like the people who do that and go out there and do those kind of things versus the people who go out there and just oh, hire me, I'm just all about for me and all about myself. They seem to be more successful than the people who are just kind of selfishly being taking stuff instead of trying to give stuff to the community.
Yeah. I mean, I can't really judge because I don't know what their situation is. Maybe they really need those jobs. So no pressure if you're don't feel pressure to oh, I have to share something with the community in order to be part of it. No, even just answering someone's question on a forum or whatever, congratulations, you're a part of it. You're contributing, you're adding some value. And I feel like that's how we grow as humanity, right? We share things and then that's how we grow. It is a little counterintuitive with, our economy and the way things work is, keeping everything very scarce. But I like to live in a world where everything is very abundant. So, and I want to participate in building a world like that. So it's a little bit of a struggle in a world where everything is focused on scarcity. But yeah, it's up to you to decide how much you want to be part of it or how much you want to do. If you have a family and 3 kids and, you have a full-time job and you're also doing a couple of other things that you're into, you're playing music, it's going to be really hard to take more time off to do, to create other things for other people.
Yeah, I think it's like you said, though, it's even just being open to help other people and maybe answer their questions. If you see someone on Twitter and they're like, oh, I'm struggling with this thing, and you know how to do it. It's just that kind of thing, isn't it? It doesn't have to be, not everyone has to make loads of tools and everything like that. But I think it's just kind of.
Not everyone can make tools. So maybe I don't know, but it seems a bit if there's anything that you want to do, just start out with the person next to you. Helping out the entire community can sound a little overwhelming, right? But if you just help out the person that you're working with or that's sitting next to you or you're close to, then that's already an achievement. Because if everyone did that, then we would all be better, right? And a lot of these tools have actually started out this way because I used to work with Justin Laws at Buck. And, we were constantly frustrated that there wasn't just a color palette tool in After Effects. Well, then, maybe I could make some time free and I got some money that I got from Ouroboros plugin. Oh, maybe we can start building a tool like that and make some time available for it. And then, other people might benefit from this as well. So, it just starts with one person often and the focus is there. And then it might be beneficial for other people too.
Are your tools still pay what you want or are they paid now? Because I have a question around that.
I like to keep a little bit of a mix of both. So Ouroboros is still name your own price. So you could take it for free, but you can also, like, if you just needed this thing for like a tiny little thing, or you just wanted to play around with it because you're a student or whatever, just go grab it for free. If you did like a huge, massive job and you want to basically support, the work that I'm doing and allowing me to create more tools, then you could fill in name your own price. There's no pressure. Like, I like to have that around, but then I also have tools up for sale because I know the value of a specific tool and I'm not afraid to charge for it. And the more I can charge for it, the more I can actually contribute to the community. So it's this like feedback loop. So I do think it's very important to charge for these things because they do add certain value to your workflow. So like it's important to charge for that. And I think it's the same for knowledge. Like, we should be charging for these things because it means a certain level of commitment as well. If you pay for something, plus it allows me to create more time and make more time available to focus on those things versus having to take on projects that, might not be as beneficial for the community. And then things like Blend as well. Like Blend, we founded this conference festival with the idea of like, well, it should run. Like we love throwing an event like Blend. We don't really profit much from it. So that way we can keep ticket prices low and things like that. So that's another thing where, you're paying more for the creation of the event or the tool or the course itself. Then that's really kind of how I see it.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, if we don't charge for things, then we can't continue doing them. And then also there won't be any kind of support for these tools and stuff. I just wanted to ask you about that because I think that some people do charge for tools and stuff and some people don't. And I think sometimes people are scared to do that. Whereas I think, well, otherwise you can't continue doing this stuff and you just have to fill all your time with client work. And then it's hard to keep it up, Right.
It's an ethical question, right? Like, I would love to live in a world right now where it's more like a resource-based economy or something like that, or where everyone has like access to resources like food and housing and, all these things for free. And then, hey, if we want to make some extra money, we can go get a job. But like, I would love to live in a world like that. But unfortunately, we live in a world where, this economy is based on, you got to pay your rent and you got to pay for food. And that means that, in order to make things work, you have to exchange like money. And there's also, it's a commitment. Like, it's not easy to get money. So if you spend it on something, it's a commitment that you're actually, if I put something up for free, then you might look into it a couple times and then you just like get busy with other things. But if you actually commit to something and you put a lot of your, financial efforts behind it as well, then you're more likely to actually gain something from it as well. So yeah, it's strange. It's strange how it works, but like you have to find the balance in that in this world.
Yeah, I agree with you as well. And like we just launched a mastermind program for Motion Hatch, and obviously that takes up a lot of my time too, but as well as why people pay for that program is because I know that they're going to show up, right? Like you have to come on a call every week. Like if you don't pay for it, maybe you won't show up, and then that's not helpful to everyone else. Like,
totally. Like if it's the same for an event, even if you throw a small event, some people, they charge like $5 or $10 for an event, and you're like, why is this not free? It's got sponsors and everything. But the reason why there's like a $5 to $10 charge is to know that you'll actually show up, because it's really easy to bail out on if something was free, so yeah, it shows a level of commitment too.
Yeah, definitely. It just seems like you do a lot of stuff. I didn't know whether you like had any ways to manage that, or like how you think about how much client work you do and then how much personal projects you do and things like that.
It just really happens naturally. Like, I think it's whatever interests me. Like, take the courses, for example, and the education. Like, I always wanted to educate my skills. Like, even 5 years ago, I set that as a goal. But it's kind of just like having all your goals and your ideas lined up and then kind of waiting for the right timing and the right opportunity to come along in order to like move forward with those. So, since I was able to like make a lot of time available in order to like, I was able to say no to a lot of freelance jobs because I've saved up money because I'm selling tools online and stuff. I'm able to concentrate a lot of my time towards like building education content. And then I have to say no to a lot of client jobs, which is difficult, but it's also like education is also something that I really wanted to do. So in 2018, I basically set a goal, like I want to spend this year as much as I can. The majority of my time I want to spend on creating education products, like done. Like people have been asking me for like years now that they wanted to learn from me. They want to see tutorials and things like that. The most ultimate way that I could do that would be in this form. Like if I would go around the country teaching, that would not be the best use of my time because I just simply don't have time for that. I have other freelance clients and other things on in my goals list that I want to achieve. So like recording it and then putting it up online in a way that I believe is with School Motion, for example, like they get very good results out of their students because of their method of teaching. So I wanted to collaborate with something like that in order to make sure that what I'm teaching is actually coming across as well. So 2018 was all about education. I'm not sure what 2019 is going to be about. Blend is going to happen in 2019. So that's a part of like what I'll be spending my time on. But it really depends on whatever the opportunity presents or whatever opportunity presents itself.
You have like a few diverse revenue streams now. Are you kind of intentionally doing that, or is it just because of the goals that you set that's kind of happened that way?
I think it happened quite organically. Like I mentioned before, I put up the Ouroboros thing for Name Your Own Prize. And then to my surprise, a lot of people were actually, giving money for that. Enough for me to actually say like, well, I could actually take off some time and like try to build another tool that's going to be helpful, another idea I have. And it's kind of like Kickstarter, right? Because a lot of people believe in your idea and then you take that money and then you build something for them and then they want that. And then it turns out to be a product. So that's how it kind of grew organically. And the same for advanced motion methods. Like Radon and McCullers was a very small tool. It didn't take as much time as building advanced motion methods. Like building advanced motion methods is like a time commitment of around 1,000 hours of work, which is like months. It's organically growing that way, for me to be able to take more time off, to say more no to clients, unfortunately, and like spend more of my time on those kinds of things. So I'm driven by creating value for the community, but I also do know the value of my work and I'm not afraid to charge for it, and as a result, I get more revenue streams so I can actually make more time available for the community and creating some of these ideas that I have that I think will be beneficial. Yeah, I think it's very beneficial for like anyone to think of multiple revenue streams. But it's not like I set out with the intention to do so.
It seems like more people are doing this, and we've spoken a lot about it recently on the podcast about people setting up different revenue streams and things like that, because then it does help you to take more time off to do the things that you are passionate about. So I think it like is a smart thing to do, but then I also think, like you're saying, it needs to be something of value. And also I would say if you want to build something, that you are going to charge for, it's like try and validate the idea first.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And I think the important thing is that you're going to create something because you want to create it. Like, it's not like I'm sitting here, it's like, well, what's the next thing that's going to set up a new revenue stream for me? I mean, that would be great. And if that could work, but there's also a lot of things that I do that are not great of a revenue stream. Like I spent a lot of time thinking about how After Effects could be improved. Like I wrote an entire article creating videos about how a program like After Effects could be updated in a way that more animation artists could take benefit of it. I didn't get paid for that, So like, there's a lot of ideas I have as well that, are not bringing in any revenue. So I think it's important to start out with something that you care about, that you want to see happen in the world. Hey, and then if you can figure out how to charge for it or like turn it into something that you can make money with, then that's the ideal, right? Maybe you do that with freelance work. Maybe you charge so much for your freelance work that you're able to take time off to do projects that you want to do. So, and I feel like that's how everything is. That's really how you eventually start to be able to do what you want to do. Because even in the beginning of my early days in animation, I would take like 4 months off to focus on one animation and make it really good. And that animation is exactly what I wanted to be doing. So even then, I was using these same techniques, but then for, just just within my work itself in order to get closer to something I really like to do.
You were building like personal projects that you really wanted to do to get more client work that you wanted to do, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Cool. Well, obviously you're like pretty in demand for motion work. Do you have a way that you qualify your client requests or anything like that? Or is there like certain things that you won't take on and certain things that you always will?
Ever since I've released the Pause Fest animation, which was the animation I actually took like 4 months off in order to create it, I've been actually really fortunate to receive like a sort of continuous stream of client work. Like in the beginning, it would be more from studios who would figure out my work. And then depending on the project that released after that, more direct to client work that would reach out. I have more requests coming in that I can take on. So for me, it's easier to be more selective. Plus, on top of that, I have the projects that I want to do myself. So I need to make time for those as well. So it just leaves a very small percentage of all the jobs that are coming in I can actually focus on. So first of all, it allows me to be selective. But yeah, like I do have a filter for when clients come and like, I want to work on things that are meaningful to me. And I feel like answer to that same question, like how could this be of value to other people? How can this, contribute to the world in some kind of way? And not just for, how can I help save the world, but also for my own like sanity. Like I don't want to be working on something that I don't care about because it's going to mentally disable me. I'm going to be bored at work if that's, what I have to be doing. If I had the choice, like I'd rather work on something that I'm actually like interested in myself. Like if I had to choose between an animation for a fast food company or an animation for a new architecture firm that wants to communicate their smart building or whatever with all this implemented technology, like then the choice for me is clear. Like there's a couple filters I have, and it's probably too much to go into right now, but like there's definitely filters that, I apply to.
Yeah, you mentioned there that you're like trying to do more work that you care about, and it's also kind of putting, good back into the world and stuff like that, even if it isn't like work for charities, basically. Because I know like you did some work for Headspace and stuff like that, and that's obviously a meditation app, and that's something that I think is quite important. So I feel like that falls under that as well, and things like that, not just working for charities doing animation. But I think that's really, really important. And you did a talk at Blend, didn't you, about that? Do you want to kind of just summarize that a bit more, what you were trying to get at there, and also like why you chose to talk about that, I guess?
Sure. So to summarize the talk at Blend is basically, I want to spend my time doing projects that I care about, because I know that when I put a lot of care and detail into the projects that I work on, like it's not just satisfying for me, it results in a more interesting life for me because I get to work on things. I get to, go behind the scenes and work with a company like Headspace or work with a company like Squarespace, all these spaces. It's weird.
Yeah.
That first of all, it just creates a more interesting life. I guess I call that quality of life. When I work on a project for a month and that project is for something that I don't really care about, like maybe it's a fast food company or whatever, and then at the end of the month, they may decide that, because there were other studios working on that same kind of pitch, they're not going to use the work that I did. I'm just kind of looking at myself and I'm like, what did I do for an entire month? Like I've worked so much and so hard my entire life to gain these incredible communication skills with motion and animation, and you can create such beautiful things with it. Why am I sitting here for a month long, like focusing that energy on something that I, first of all, am not passionate about, don't care about, which is, I believe, going to reflect in the work. And at the end of it, it's just going to get trashed. Like, what am I doing? Like, sure, it might help make me some money so I can survive in this world, right? That's a justification for a lot of these things. But how can I afford to spend the majority of my time on things that actually do matter to me, because that allows me to grow in this world and achieve a better quality of life? I think that really sums up the talk. also making people realize that, we have the power to choose who we work for. We have the control of, oh, you're into this. Well, you could help support that if you want with your skills. Like, it's not just that you always have to go there and do a bunch of commercials or explainer videos. You can, you can just look at the world and see what you can do with the skills you have and the problem-solving mentality as an artist, what story you can help tell. That's really the message. And I feel like a lot of people, for some reason, they might not feel empowered that way, where they're like, they're kind of just in that system that's already laid out for them. It's not like that's an easy step either. It takes work to do that. But, how willing are you to improve the quality of your life?
I think it brings up a lot of things for me. Like, it makes me think about being more intentional about what their work is and what they actually want to get out of it, because a lot of people don't seem to think about, oh, what do I want out of my motion design career and what can it do for me? Like, not just as like, this is my job and it makes me money. You know what I mean? Like, obviously sometimes people take on projects just for money. I think that's okay. But then I also think people should be trying to aim for what they actually want to work on. And I think it's kind of a problem, like, I think I mentioned it before on the podcast, but where you kind of, if you're in that rung of like low paying clients and you don't know where your next client's coming from and you're kind of just going round and round in circles, you're just going to be kind of desperate for the next job. Whereas if you start raising your prices a bit and feeling like you have permission to say no to some clients, then I think you're going to be in a better position. But it's hard to kind of sometimes make that jump up. And I think sometimes it's just like a mindset thing. Like, you're like, oh, what? I can't raise my price, and things like that.
I don't think it's as much of a jump or like an instant thing. It's more like a slow, gradual transition. Because it took me like 10 years to get to here where I am now, where I was. But I would default it back to like, where's the majority of your focus? If your focus is for the majority of the time on projects and things that you don't like working on, that don't make you enough money, and you're not motivated about it, it's not going to give you any energy, it just takes so much mental energy from you, then that's going to be incredibly draining. And you know what? If your focus is there all the time and you put that out into the world, guess what? The way the world kind of works is that it's just going to put more of that stuff back on your plate. So, if you work on that very, the minimum you can do, and then you spend and even you put your focus even more on things that you do like to do, then more of that stuff might start coming back towards you. And that's really what I focus on. Like, that works for our work, but it also works as simple as like things like watching the news. If you're constantly focusing your attention on Twitter or on news channels on television that broadcast a certain vibe or mindset, then you're gonna get like soaked up in that. And like, you want to make sure that you focus your attention on the things that you want to be focusing on in order for more of that to result back into you. It's almost like, I heard this metaphor once that I really like. It's like a radio receiver. Right now in the air, there are all kinds of different radio signals, but it's up to you to determine what radio signal you tune into. And if you're going to tune into this radio signal that has a lot of like crappy jobs you don't care about and things like that, you're going to get a lot more of that through the radio speakers. But if you're tuning into a different channel that has like a lot more of the things that you do want to listen to, you're going to get a lot more interesting things coming your way. That's kind of like how I feel like it works. And we hear a lot of people say that, right? Well, I put out this really amazing project and then more of that type of work came back to me because another client saw that work and they wanted something similar for their organization or business. I do believe it works kind of like that. It really depends on where your focus is, I feel like. Our attention is a precious resource that a lot of companies love to exploit, like social media talking about that. They love your attention all the time. And in order to get our attention, it needs to be more and more dramatic, So that's why I also feel like a lot of these news articles or articles online in general, I have very intense like headlines, purely because, they want your attention. So you got to be very careful with that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really true about focus. And I did a talk recently as well. And and it was a lot about like, what do you want? Like half the time, getting what you want in life is just thinking about what you want and like pointing towards that in a way, because that's what I found, but like with this podcast and Motion Hatch and things like that, I just like reassess all the time. Like, what do I want? What do I want to get out of this? What do I want to get out of doing Motion Hatch? What do I want out of my motion design career? And just even like thinking about it and kind of building in, some goals and trying to break them down. It's just helped me so much. It's just completely like transformed my whole career, whereas before I felt like when I first started out in the industry, I'd just be like, oh, I just have to take like whatever job comes to me, like I can't afford to be like picky and things like that. But as soon as I sort of changed my mindset and was like, well, no, because I want to use my freelance career to travel more, for example. Like I would just kind of do that. I would like work on some projects and then like save up and then like take a month off and do some traveling. And I think that's important.
I think it's really good you mentioned that, you kind of reevaluate all the time. Like, what is it that, I want to be doing next? Or because it's never a thing that you set and then you're just going to do that for 30 years. It's constantly evolving and changing. And I find myself at the end of every bigger project, like the end of this project right now with School of Motion, like that took a long time. Like at the end of this, I'm kind of like, sitting down on the floor with a whole bunch of papers around me with notes and drawings and things like that and goals that I've had for a very long time. And I'm just kind of like, sitting with those goals and ideas for like hours to just like listen to music and just figure out like, well, what are some of the next steps of where I want to be going towards, So like, I think that's important to do. And yeah, if then you have the entire internet like screaming and like grabbing you for your attention, like it's important to focus on those kinds of things, because if you don't do it, you're just gonna wake up one day and like, oh crap, I gotta pay my bills. Like, I better take a job that like just came to me and I don't have much choice. But I don't like to work on this, but I have to now. So
yeah, I think that's really cool that you said like you sit down regularly and kind of just with loads of paper and think about it. And I just think it's like no one does that. No one makes time to do that.
And you know what? It's very uncomfortable because now, you maybe have some music without lyrics, and then it's just your thoughts, and what you want to do. You can't just, tune into something else and be distracted. You have to like listen to what is it that I want or where I see myself going and like what's important to me. And like, you got to be asking those questions. You can't be afraid of your own internal dialogue.
Yeah. And I think some people are just so busy, and me included, that you just like go to bed at night and then you start thinking about like all your life and everything, and then like you get up the next day and you just carry on, and you're like, but it's like, have a different time to think about that, not just worrying like when you're lying in bed at night, make other time to be more constructive with it, I think.
Totally. Well, the very first thing, that if you feel that strain, right, and you don't have any time to think about it, first of all, you just have to make time for yourself. That's it. Like, even with the PauseFest animation, that really put my work on the map, I would say. Like after that, there was a significant change in like, people reaching out to me for work. Like, you have to make time for yourself, no matter what. No matter if that means like saving up a bunch of money so you're able to take time off, or if it means like eating rice for 6 months so you can, save money on food and that way are able to come by another month without working. Like, you have to make time for yourself. Any way you want to make that happen. Borrow a computer from someone in order to like render your animations. Like, that's some of the strategies that I was doing, like, back in the day when I was still living with my parents. Like, I built a website for someone that had a gear rental company. It was like, can I borrow the iMac for like 2 months because I want to export my reel? That nowadays you can do that on a laptop, but like, you got to make it work. Make it work. Make time for yourself, because it's probably the most important thing you can ever do in your life. Because if you never get to it, you wake up one day when you do have time for yourself, when you're probably retired, and you look back and you're like, man, what a roller coaster. Like, where in that whole trajectory did I feel like I was able to steer this ship into the direction that I wanted to go in? And like, that's an important thing to take time for. You only get one life, You can only spend the time one way.
I keep saying it, but I feel like I just like tell everyone the same thing on the podcast. I'm always like, because obviously like when I'm talking on this podcast, I was reflecting like my worldview, I guess. But it's just like that thing again of like, what do you want your motion design career to do for you? And like, just think about that question. I think that could be a good start, you know?
And we need repetition of this too, because it's not like you can hear this once and then you're like, oh, okay, I got it. Like,
yeah,
I will
cool.
do this for, you get distracted, like, and then you have to, come back to it. But then maybe someone needs to send you a reminder for that. And maybe that's what this podcast can feel like. Hey, it's time again.
Yeah,
when are we gonna make
again?
when are we gonna make time for yourself? Anyways.
Yeah, it's true. When was the last time a client paid you late, or you wanted to charge for project files but didn't know how? Most of the issues we face in our businesses as motion designers can be solved with good communication. The best way to communicate your terms upfront to the client and ensure your project runs smoothly is to have a solid contract in place. In talking to motion designers, I know that most are either not using a contract at all or have cobbled together one from various online sources. I get it. Lawyers can be expensive and you just want to get on with what you do best, which is making great work. That's exactly why I created the Freelance Contract Bundle. Designed in collaboration with lawyers from both the UK and the US, the Freelance Contract Bundle is a set of downloadable contract templates made specially for motion designers and animators. It includes a commission contract and a freelance terms of service contract, helping you create smoother relationships both direct to client and also while working with agencies and studios. To find out how the Freelance Contract Bundle can help protect your business, your work, and ensure your projects run smoothly, go to motionhatch.com/contract. Now let's get back to the episode. So do you feel like, working on the personal projects and then release them out in the world, is that kind of how you've got more direct clients compared to studio and agency work?
I would say so. Definitely the quality of work has something to do with it. People like the way that I approach moving specific things for a specific reason and why things move. People can see, I think, that I put a lot of care into animation. Like I really care about something, like when I animate it and when it goes out, if something's not right, I'll go back to the studio and like freaking export another render where it is right. I think if you put those qualities into your work, like it will get noticed, because there's a lot of people out there that are not willing to commit that amount of care into the work. Yeah, I would say like that's the majority of how clients eventually find me. Buck found me because of the Pause Fest animation that I created and some of the other work that I released. Squarespace happened through a friend, like that heard that I had a great experience working with me, but it wasn't really 1.5 years after that introduction that they finally found a project to collaborate on. So it also sometimes just takes forever, so you never really know. Working with Google Material Design team, that kind of worked because I was working on a couple Google projects with Buck, but also because I released the Ouroboros plugin and other plugins, and they were constantly looking for people who can make the connection between an engineer and a designer, like someone who can bridge that gap. And I was able to, live in those both worlds pretty comfortably. What's cool is you're not just going to go to Google and work on any kind of project. You're going to work on projects that are of interest to what you're good at or want to be doing. So we worked on a lot of projects where it's like, well, the engineers have an idea that's really cool, but how are the designers are going to get it? Or how is an investor going to get it? How is a manager of a specific department going to get it? Can we send them a 5-minute video explaining what the engineers have in mind? And then they can submit like a budget so that they can start working on that project. Things like that. And then how to get clients, like to me, there's no step-by-step directions in order to get more clients. Like I don't feel like I have control over getting a client. I can't make a client hire me for a project that they have. Like they have to award that project to me. So I always ask myself like, well, what can I do in my work that wants to make them work with me? And I go into much more detail in this on like the freelance guide that I created, but I believe there's like 3 core details that I always pay attention to is like, and the very first one is just helping others and doing favors and being resourceful, because who doesn't want to work with someone who is helpful and resourceful all their time and comes with solutions? So if you do a lot of your research, if you do a lot of your homework on how After Effects work and what kind of tools are out there. People want to be working with you because you know all the ins and outs about everything and how to get, technical things done, how to get solutions for problems that you might face in a project. And then another thing I think will help get a lot of clients to come to you is like through recommendation. And that's something that, you can't just go and work with someone and then automatically assume that someone will recommend you. You have to earn it in a way. You have to show to the people that you're working with that you care about the project and that you can take a responsibility over the work that they actually give you. And if you can show that you take responsibility, like, who doesn't want to work with a person like that? If I'd have to recommend a friend of mine and I know that they're responsible, then I feel comfortable recommending that to another client. And then the third one I feel like that can help you get more clients is like making connections, not just in the motion design industry, because like if I go to a conference like Blend, that may not be a good place to get more work or direct client work because, guess what? At the conference, there's a lot of people that are in the same bubble. So, they're also looking for work. So it's like the wrong place to be almost. You come to those conferences for different reasons, I feel like. But, there's also a lot of different events or other different bubbles out there that you can dive into and just kind of scope around and be like, well, what kind of organization do you have? What kind of business do you have? What are the things that you're trying to achieve? And then while you're hearing about all these different like industries, you can start to think about like, well, what could I potentially do with my, animation skills or design skills in order to solve some of those problems? And then you'd have to go into a little bit more pitching and presenting of what you could do as a person that may be a little bit more like, you have to act more as a company versus like a production studio because they are not familiar with your bubble. So it's a little bit more complex there, but like it is possible. And I've gotten some clients that way too. Another thing that I feel like a client, really the two main reasons that they're hiring you is either because you're able to help them improve a product so that they can make more money as a business themselves, or you're coming in to save the business a lot more money. It's either one of those reasons, or it might be like a unicorn reason where it's Google or Apple that just has so much money that they don't really care. They just want to, have good people in-house that can work on stuff. But again, like that's also probably because, that improves their products and then makes them more money in a way. So, so it's really those two main things. So if I can come into any business and look at the way that they run things and suggest a solution to how they can be more efficient with their workflow, then that's going to be value. That's going to be of value to them. So I can potentially make money that way. Or if I can come into a business and add a significant amount of production value that's going to like improve the way that they communicate, or it's going to improve the status of how they present something, then that's going to be of value to them. So that's kind of how I think about it. And so instead of like, how can I find clients? Because it's not like you could just find a bunch of clients and go pick them up at the hardware store. It's like, what can I do so that clients want to work with me?
I like when you were saying about, going to different events outside motion design. And like, again, it's like something that I talked about recently in my talk at Keyframes is like, we need to hang out with people who aren't motion designers. And then we need to kind of think like, how can we as motion designers maybe help them solve their problems, because that's what businesses want. Like you were saying, they're looking to solve a problem. Like they're not like, oh yeah, I really want an animation. Like if it's a direct client, like you say, they're going to be like selling a product and things like that. And that's like solving a problem for them. It's maybe it's getting them their name more out there, or they're like doing like something where they're showcasing the product so more people want to buy it, in an exciting way. So I think that's really important. And it's something that people don't think about a lot. And I feel like I wouldn't even be talking to you right now if I hadn't done something like that, kind of went into trying to travel more and work more remotely and kind of went down that path a little bit. And then that sort of led me to doing Motion Hatch because I saw something that was outside of the industry that I felt that could work very well for our industry and that it needed to be done. And kind of having my motion design hat on when I was kind of out and about in a different industry, and that kind of, that's how this whole thing was made.
And that ties back to what we said in the very beginning, where you're going out there and you're seeing something else that inspires you that's not really happening in this motion design bubble quite yet. And you can bring that in and just flavor it differently with motion design and see if that works. And another good example is I worked on this project for Sana Labs, which is an artificial intelligent teaching application. So what they do is so if you're trying to learn a new language with an app, they have an API or a system that they can implement that's going to allow the app to understand if you understand something already. Wow, this is getting complicated. But they do a whole bunch of it's difficult to explain. And for this reason as well, it's really helpful to have motion design and compact videos that explain what they do. But motion design is being integrated so much more these days in any type of business now. You can see it a lot where, any business, when they hire new people, they need to get them up to speed with how the company works and some of the company rules. Usually you might be sent a PDF with some of the rules of the company, But nowadays you can set up entire online courses and training programs for companies in order to, get their new employees up to a certain level so that they're familiar with how things work in the company. And, even big companies like Google have that, right? When you go and work for them, you're being guided through this education process on how things are done there and when you're going to get paid out and where things are, how you go about things. So recently too, they had the need to solve when someone's interested in their product, they get on the phone and they always have to say the same thing. It's oh, this is our product, and it takes half an hour. So this is our product, this is what it stands, this is what it can do, and then they go into more details based on that specific business. So instead of wasting half an hour of time every time on one of those calls, they were well, why can't we make that more efficient and do that with a video? So that might be something that, that's why I came in to consult and be hey, well, first they wanted to do a 4-minute animation explaining that half hour, like a summed down version of that half hour that they usually kind of waste on explaining this with the client. Can we just narrow that into a 4-minute animation video? But in the end, because they didn't really have much of funding for it, I alternatively suggested to why not record a video where you're just speaking, where you're doing this half an hour of talking, and then you could just send that before the call to anyone, and they can get their basic package. And then from there, you can start talking about more specific details with the clients that might be interested in your service or your product. So there's a lot of different opportunities that can work for our motion design world, especially now that it gets so much more integrated into any type of business.
Yeah, and I feel that's really cool that they wanted you to do something, but you were actually, you could just do this, and it's not always, animation isn't always the answer. And I think being able to say that, they actually respect you more, and then they could come back to you for something else, it makes complete sense.
Yeah, can you imagine doing 4 minutes of animation on some abstract things of how their product works? It's going to be so much work. Why not just add more personality to it while you just record yourself, speaking about this thing, get a nice camera, get a nice lighting setup, looks professional. Those are all things you can just, you could take the 4-minute animation thing and make a whole bunch of money. If they don't have that budget, you can suggest something else. And but there's all kinds of different ways to think about it. As long as you keep in mind those core two things, how can I increase, the profit of a company, or how can I save them money? Because our world is so focused on, economics, those are currently the main important things.
Yeah. And I think, like you're saying, even just thinking about things like that and presenting to the client, you're oh, I know you're doing this because you want to make money or you want to save time or something like that. Most people don't do that. And I think that's what gets you more direct client work, basically, is thinking about those kind of things.
Yeah, for us, the animations are always kind of cool as well, right? It's just, isn't it just cool to have a super awesome animation? Oh, you guys don't care much about that? Because that's another thing that you will find, once you start moving outside of your motion design bubble, is that the majority of this world is perfectly fine with, someone just filming something on an iPhone all shaky, and as long as the concept is in there. it's done. I think YouTube is a good example of that, because there's a lot of videos on YouTube that might not have the slickest animation or the slickest camera production work, but they have a lot of views, and there's a lot of people who are like, interested in that kind of content. So like it just shows you that it's really all about communication, and that the graphics are a medium to make that possible and to solve those kinds of problems that people are having with, like, we need to communicate what our product is. Here, we can create this for it, and now it's communicated. You can send it around, you get funding for your idea, or you can, can train someone.
Yeah, that makes sense, definitely. And I think just even people like listening to this and like thinking more about those ideas, I think will be really helpful. I just want to ask you one more question. If there's one piece of advice from our conversation today that you want people to take away with them, what would that be?
Yeah, I think it really comes back to what we just mentioned, actually. Just actively pursue something that you're curious about. Make time for yourself. Let's keep it about this. Let's just devote the entire podcast to that. Like, make time for yourself to find out what you're curious about. Because even touching back on those like alternative revenue streams and things like that, I could right now start making After Effects templates from Premiere Pro. I know there's a lot of editors out there that want animation templates for their After Effects projects. And, with my skills, I might be able to do something that might be of benefit to them. But is that really how I want to be spending my next couple months, like creating templates in After Effects? You have to ask yourself the question, like, what do I want to be focusing my time on, and how can I afford doing that? Let's put it like that.
I think that's awesome. And I really, obviously I really believe in this kind of thing as well. So I think that's really good advice. So where can the audience find you and your work and also your courses?
Everything will link to all those different places. If you go to georegulus.com, which is 2 words, geo and regulus. If you go there, or you just Google my name or anything close to that, and you'll probably arrive at it too. You'll be able to find it there. And there's also always I'm really open to suggestions as well. So I'd love to hear if you have an idea that you want me to make, or a tool that you want to see, or anything else. Like, I have submission forms for all that stuff, because I love hearing. That's really how advanced motion methods came to be. Like, I had an interest in teaching, but it's through the suggestions and the requests from people that actually, put more weight on those kinds of ideas in order to eventually turn them into reality. So, if a lot of people are suggesting this, it might be something worth pursuing. And I think it shows, because like the very first session sold out in 5 minutes. The second session sold out in 25 minutes. So if you have suggestions or you want to see something, send it over, and I'll be able to take a look at it and take it into consideration next time I have time to build something.
That's great. We'll put everything in the show notes as well, so everyone can easily find all the links to everything. But thank you so much for coming on this show.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much again to Sander for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I think that was an awesome conversation. We discussed so much stuff. You can always find the show notes at motionhatch.com. It was amazing talking to him. He's an amazing motion designer. And I think it's really important what we talked about, making time for yourself and trying to find clients and projects that you care about. These things are really important to me. And I hope that you're inspired by this episode and you go out there and do that. Thank you so much for being here. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do leave us a rating review wherever you get your podcasts, and please do subscribe, because we've got loads more awesome episodes coming up for you. Thank you so much again. Have a great week. See ya.